After a 43-40 win against Baylor, West Virginia will look to do something they have yet to do in the Neil Brown era, and that is beat Texas Tech. We preview that and talk more about West Virginia's 3-3 start in this episode of the Blue Gold Sports Podcast. What's up, everybody? Wesley Shoemaker, Aaron Parker, coming with you today with another episode of the Blue Gold Sports Podcast. Mountaineers got that much needed win last Thursday against Baylor. You could call this a mini bye. They get a couple extra days here to prepare for Texas Tech, who was on a bye week coming into this game. They have not played since October 8th. Mountaineers will look to do something they have not done since 2018 under Dana Holgorsen, and that is beat the Red Raiders. Mountaineers have lost 3 straight. You could say it's been Neil Brown's kryptonite, which is funny to say as Neil Brown formerly worked at Texas Tech. Graham Harrell returns home as well. So a lot of storylines there, but we'll start here. Texas Tech, they are going to throw the ball, and they're going to throw the ball like crazy, and West Virginia struggles to stop the pass. And I think that is problem 1, and I think that is problem 1 through 5 before you really get into anything else, as far as number of plays goes, as far as anything goes. But the problem is that Texas Tech is second in the country in passing yards per game, and they go for something like 365 passing yards per game, I believe. It's an absurd number. Texas Tech has played a really tough schedule. They've 5 out of their 6 games have become against ranked opponents. And what's worse for West Virginia is that they have some serious injury concerns on the defensive side of the ball, which we will get into later. So, Aaron, I'll start with you here. Just kind of your biggest 2 things. 1, what West Virginia has to do to beat Texas Tech this week, and what you think will be West Virginia's biggest challenge when facing the Red Raiders.
I think what West Virginia needs to do, I think Neil Brown came out and said it. He's like, we're not going to pitch a shutout, and that's pretty obvious. The defense, they made some big plays against Baylor, but giving up points when we're talking about that, they've struggled. And Texas Tech loves to drop back and throw the football. That's historically what they're known for. They're down to their third quarterback, and yet that third quarterback, who's a freshman, came in and threw the ball 63 times against Oklahoma State. That to me is just kind of baffling. Like, your third string quarterback going into the season, you're comfortable letting him throw 63 times and run the ball 15 times against Oklahoma State. So I think WVU, what they're going to need to do is win another game like Baylor. 2 straight weeks of, you got to match the points. And, the defense has to get off the field a couple of times, but assuming they give up upper 30s or into the 40s again, the offense has to be, pound for pound with the Red Raider offense. And, they got to minimize their mistakes, because I think the offense will have to compensate for the defense a couple of times, and that's how they got to beat Texas Tech.
Yeah, for me, it all starts with execution down near the red zone. Texas Tech on the year, 26 touchdowns, which is the 3rd fewest in the Big 12. So that whole bend, don't break thing we kind of felt in the last few possessions of Baylor, where the defense, they gave up yards, but once they got down into West Virginia territory, 3 or less. So I think that's going to be the biggest challenge for me if I'm West Virginia, is holding Texas Tech to fewer than 6 on possessions. Because if you can get 3 possessions where they get 3 points instead of 21 points, well, that's almost 2 touchdowns right there. So things like that, little things within the game where you have to be able to take advantage of where Texas Tech has struggled, and that is scoring touchdowns. The biggest thing I think West Virginia has to do, and I think they just have to have JT Daniels keep the ball in West Virginia's hands. And that is because Texas Tech will run a bajillion plays. Texas Tech is averaging something like 96 plays per game, which is 10 more than the second most in the country. They ran 108 plays against Oklahoma State, which is absolutely absurd when you're on the road against a top 10 team. So you said it, their 3rd string quarterback threw the ball 62 times against Oklahoma State. So you've got to keep the ball out of their hands. You've got to be able to run the ball. And truth be told, Texas Tech does not stop the run well. They have the second worst rushing defense in the Big 12, 146 yards per game given up on the ground. West Virginia should have CJ back. They're going to have Tony Mathis. They're going to have Justin Johnson. So for me, the biggest thing West Virginia has to do is keep the ball out of Texas Tech's hands. That starts with taking care of the football, being smart with the clock. Two things you have with JT Daniels, but you also have to be able to run the ball effectively and be smart overall with your game plan and clock management.
Yeah, I agree with you. And what you said, I mean, Texas Tech, they don't have a great run stopping defense, and they've never really, they're not really known for their defense historically. And I think that speaks true to this year's team too. So yeah, you don't want to, I don't know. I feel like the defense will struggle on West Virginia's side. So you don't want to take the air out of the ball, especially for the West Virginia offense. You want to keep, the clock, in your favor, snaps in your favor and all that. But in a different way than like what Neil Brown has done in the past. I think like a pick game from this year, at Oklahoma last year. I think we, the WVU team really had control of the clock, but I think it was really trying to take the air out of the ball. Maybe not against Pitt, but against Oklahoma last year. And it ended up kind of blowing up in their face. So I think you just got to go pound for pound with them. And you got to establish the run early because you got two consistent running backs as of right now in Justin Johnson and Tony Mathis. And then if you add CJ Donaldson back to that rotation, that should be a pretty lethal combination for the Red Raiders to face. So no little mistakes, no fumbling the ball like Mathis did against Virginia Tech. And, I think it'll come down to the little things. The last time WV played at Texas Tech in the pandemic year, it came down to, there's multiple plays that happened, but I think it really came down to one play where Sam James caught a screen and somebody just took the ball from him and took it back to the house. So just little things like that against Baylor. I think the little things came up big for West Virginia, including that blocked extra point by Dante Stills. I think that was one of the big differences in the game. So whichever team, gets those little errors, I think might lose the game towards the end.
Couple things I'll mention before I kind of add on to what you said. A couple facts here. First, last three meetings between these teams, West Virginia is 0-3. 2019 in Morgantown, Red Raiders won 38-17. 2020, as you just mentioned, 34-27 win for Texas Tech and Lubbock. Then last year, obviously, the Mountaineers were down big, tied it up in the third, but just couldn't get it done at home. 23-20 loss. It felt like a laundry list of injuries that Neil Brown talked about. First and foremost, Michael Laughlin done for the year. You really do feel for that guy. It is his third ACL, I believe, on the same knee. And, it's hard enough to come back once. It's hard enough to come back twice. I hope he comes back a third time. I'm not sure if he will. I don't think anyone is. I can't imagine having 3-year-long injuries happen on the same leg 3 different times. And as Neil Brown said, he was playing well. So that's the biggest one. Just going down the list here from what Neil said earlier in the week, cornerback situation. 3 cornerbacks that could play this week. Start off Wesley McCormick. He exited in the first quarter, I believe it was, against Baylor. He's questionable. According to Neil Brown. Charles Woods, he has not played since Pitt, had the broken ankle, had the surgery. Neil Brown said he is hopeful. That is a quote, hopeful. He plays. I personally don't think Charles Woods plays. I think they're going to keep erring on the side of caution, and he will be bumped back. But I do expect him to play sometime this month, whether it is this week or next week against TCU. Rashad Ajayi also exited against Baylor. He should be good to go. Neil Brown said, quote, you should expect him to play. Running back room, CJ Donaldson. A little bit, we learned some more details. CJ Donaldson could have returned a little sooner. Neil Brown said there was no reason to risk it. He said it really was a scary scene down there in Austin. He has not practiced with the team until this week, until yesterday on Tuesday. If I had to guess, CJ Donaldson's playing this Saturday. Jordan White should be good to go on the offensive line. And then Sean Martin, Neil Brown does not know yet as of that was yesterday on Tuesday. Said they're going to run through practice with him, see how he does. So probably a true question mark there with him. So that's my couple things. But yeah, to what you're saying, West Virginia's got to take care of the ball. They did that against Baylor, and they also didn't shoot themselves in the foot like they have in the past. And I think you see that with the penalties. Obviously, there was that one goal line penalty. You just can't have that, especially on the road, especially in that environment. But For me, it's going to be whoever starts fast. Just kind of doing some research on these teams. West Virginia and Texas Tech are tied at 74th in the country in scoring offense in the first quarter. Both teams are averaging 4.8 points per quarter in the first quarter. So Dante Stills was asked this week, what's it going to take to beat these guys? Because he's done it. Obviously, he went down there and he was on the 2018 team that beat them. So he's done it. He said you got to start fast. And so I think that's the biggest thing is whichever team kind of starts the fastest will get it done. And if you're West Virginia, you've had some slow starts, you've had some fast starts. Last week against Baylor was a great start, 3 and out on defense, and then you came down and scored 6. So if you get something like that going, I think that's a good sign moving forward.
Agreed. And the starts against Texas Tech over the last couple of years. I mean, I was at that 2019 game at home. That one was pretty embarrassing. That game was pretty much over from the start. Last year was not good. Homecoming, striped the stadium and fell behind early and had to compensate, and it just wasn't enough weight. So getting a fast start against the Red Raiders is all important. But I think it's just kind of weird, you know. This has been what you said, you know, the kryptonite for Neil Brown, and he was 0-3 against Matt Wells at Texas Tech, and Matt Wells got fired halfway through the season last year. I'm pretty sure Matt Wells only won like 6 or 7 Big 12 games, and 3 of those came up against the Mountaineers. So obviously, I think the coaching staff and Neil Brown need to make adjustments. Obviously, it's a very different team this year, but you know, I think they have a good coach in Joey McGuire over there. You know, very very good track record at the high school level in Texas, and you know, spent a couple years at Baylor, so I think he knows what he's doing. And I think Neil Brown is going to have to step up his game a little bit because he needs to get this monkey off of his back.
Yeah, and I think that the biggest thing for me is how will this defense play? Because against Baylor, they gave up 650 yards of offense, which is just like that brings. Sorry, not 650. That's a different number. 590 yards of offense against Baylor, and that's just crazy to me. How you can give up that many yards of offense and still win the game, because they also did put up 500 themselves. Texas Tech, one thing they do is turn the ball over, especially through the air. Texas Tech 10 interceptions on the year. And if you're West Virginia, Joey McGuire kind of talked about it, put it like this when he was talking about West Virginia this week. He said, usually when you get a couple interceptions, they got one last week, they start to come in bunches. And so hopefully if you're West Virginia, they start to stack onto each other, because you have not really turned opponents over, with the exception of last week against Baylor. And truth be told, one of them was a blocked PAT, and another one of them was more of the quarterback kind of just not having the best play. And another one was the quarterback could have just gone down with a sack, and he decided to throw it up right to RB Burke. So obviously they got the interception, and so that's what matters, and we'll take that and we'll take the result. But what I'm saying is the opportunity will be there, because Texas Tech ranks second in the country in passing offense, but they rank like 81st in the country in passing efficiency. So there's going to be opportunities. There's going to be bad throws, because when you throw the ball 50, 60, 65 times a game, not all 60 throws are going to be perfect. And so when they are not perfect, that's when you have to take advantage. And I think West Virginia knows that. And I think that's the important thing of not letting the statistic of yards get to you, but the statistic of like touchdowns and points allowed and turnovers be the driving force of that defense.
Yeah, the Mountaineers are going to have to make some plays, like you said, against Baylor. I mean, you know, the scoop and score by Jazeer Cox, while it was a good play on Cox's end, you know, the quarterback just kind of dropped the ball. You know, the interception late to Burks was, you know, somebody was getting pressure on the quarterback, and he just kind of threw it up. So you make a good point. They're going to have to go out there and make plays, especially in a high scoring game. You know, you got to turn them over. And obviously the Mountaineers have kind of struggled with that. Yeah, they didn't get anything going against Pitt as far as turning the ball over. I don't think much against Towson, and definitely not against Texas. So they're going to have to bring the pressure to Texas Tech. They're going to have to get pressure to the quarterback to affect his throws. Whoever he is, you know, Baron Morton or Donovan Smith, either one of them is capable, you know, taking snaps behind center, and they're comfortable dropping back and throwing the football. So they're going to have to make the play. I think they did that when it comes to the block PAT, but like that's something you don't see a whole lot.
And that's also like that's a play that's if it got points, but if it
Yeah.
didn't get points, it's not a play that changes the game because it's not like you steal a possession from the blocked PAT.
No, you're right. You bring up a good point, and that's just something you don't see a whole lot. And when you're talking about turnovers, you're usually thinking about maybe a game-winning interception when you're up 3 or 6 or 7 late, and that's what I want to see from this defense is somebody step up and make a play. But um, I do have my concerns with Wilson Lamb being out for the first half with the targeting call. Charles Woods, even if he plays, Neil Brown said it'll be a very limited role. And like you said, you don't think he'll play, which I tend to agree with you on that. There's not a ton of depth right there, but I'm looking for somebody like Rashad Ajayi or maybe Jacoby Spells to step up and make a play. Jacoby Spells made the play against Virginia Tech, pick 6 against Grant Wells. So, he can do it. But he's gonna have to do it against a better opponent, and it's on the road, so you're gonna have to really bring the pressure to them.
This also may be a game where instead of having to rely on JT Daniels like you have so much this year, you tend to rely on your running backs. Like against Baylor, JT Daniels threw the ball 37 times, and it might be a game where if you're trying to play keep away in a sense, that you have JT Daniels throw the ball under 25 times, you keep the clock running, keep the chains moving. You don't have to have those chunk plays. You grind it out for 4, 5, 6 yards here. Sure, the chunk plays are great, and sure those explosive plays are nice, but when your defense then has to go back out, it's not like there's got to be part of you that realizes the other team will tire your defense out if your defense doesn't get off the field. So you have to be smart with the ball on offense, but you also have to be a smart kind of aggressive. And I'm curious to see how they kind of draw that line and like balance that because I'm pretty sure in the back of their heads they're going to think, okay, we have to be smart so our defense doesn't get killed in the third and fourth
Mm-hmm.
quarter, but also at the same time we can't play scared and we can't think about that where we're limiting our offense. So there's a line to be drawn there. I'm not sure how they do it. Do I think they do kind of some sort of thing like that? Yes. Would I be surprised if they ran the ball 45 times? No, because they should have the complementary of all three backs. So expect if I'm putting anything on this game, I expect West Virginia to run the ball like crazy.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I'd like to see a healthy balance of both. Obviously, you always want to see a balanced offense, but Texas Tech isn't that good against the run, and in a game where you're probably gonna have some tired secondary, some tired defenders that are giving up points, you're gonna need to run the ball, and I think the Mountaineers will do that. I wonder if it'll be I wonder what kind of offense they'll have. Obviously, against like Virginia Tech, a lot of running there. JT Daniels made some throws. Found Sam James once over the middle for a touchdown. Found Kane Prather a good bit, but honestly, there was a big dose of Justin Johnson and CJ Donson just kind of running it, finding the gaps, and they did a good job of that, and they established dominance that way. But in a kind of true Big 12 type game, you're going to have to utilize JT Daniels and Bryce Ford Wheaton, and Ford Wheaton has caught a touchdown in a couple games, so I think you're going to have to go to the air, like it or not, and so I think they're going to need to utilize that. Caden Prather caught 100 yards last week, so they're gonna utilize those guys, but I'd like to see a balanced offense that can keep the defense on their toes for Texas Tech.
And I think also to your point there of Bryce Ford Wheaton not having a touchdown, like Caden Prather's emergence as a true sophomore is just drawing all the more attention back to KP. So you can only do so much to keep both of them down. I think the best way to beat West Virginia is to make them one dimensional and run the ball. Do I think Texas Tech can do that? No, because I think West Virginia can run the ball successfully against Texas Tech because Tech's run defense is poor. So West Virginia needs to utilize KP and Bryce because you can't keep them both down. One of them's going to get going, and once one of them gets in a zone, like you could have two guys on him and he still might go make a catch. Either one of them. They're both that talented. So for me, it's more of a matter of finding out what works and sticking with it. And I think against Baylor, you saw what worked. It was a lot of more downfield passing and outside runs. And and there's been times, I'm not saying it has been this year specifically, but there's been times where teams don't stick with what's working, and if West Virginia wants to win, they have to stick with what's working for them. I want to talk about Texas Tech, their season. They come into this game having lost 2 straight. Little season recap: Murray State week 1 rolled them, then a double overtime win at home versus then number 25 Houston, loss on the road to number 16 NC State, overtime win at home versus then 22 Texas, and then a loss at Kansas State ranked 25th, and then a loss at then number 7 Oklahoma State. So they've played really good teams and they've put up significant points. So as you said way back in the beginning of this thing, don't expect West Virginia to hold back and stop these guys on defense. They're going to score. It's just a matter if you can score more. And truth be told, their defense hasn't been that great either. 16 points against NC State. All right, NC State isn't that good of a offensive team. They are built on that defense, I'd say. And everyone else has scored 30 plus against them. They're about 30 points. So there's opportunity there. I think this game gets up into the upper 30s, lower 40s. So I'm not sure. I'm just not sure that West Virginia's defense is capable of stopping a team that can pass the ball 65 times.
Yeah, I'm not really confident in it either, especially, given Texas Tech's track record against good opponents this year through 6 games. And not to be redundant because you brought it up at the beginning of the podcast, but I think it really, really does matter about how the Mountaineers start. Obviously, both teams, it matters, but really for WVU, I mean, you look at that Texas game. We previewed that game, and no, we didn't expect to beat Texas, but we thought it'd be a pretty high-scoring game and come down to a possession or two. And WVU goes out there and they kind of lay an egg in the beginning, and then boom, they're down 28-0. And that Texas team lost to Texas Tech in Lubbock. So, the Mountaineers offense, I think that's from an offensive perspective. I mean, I think Texas Tech is going to come out and they're going to score a couple touchdowns early. I do think that's going to happen. So, no 3 and outs early for the WVU offense. No early mistakes because there was a lot of those against Texas. I think that's really going to be, a key point to just kind of get into that, dogfight type of shootout game that we're kind of previewing. But if they fall down a couple scores early, that shootout game might not even happen.
I mean, in fairness, though, West Virginia also did fall down 2 scores early against Baylor. They were down 17-7. And then if not for that fumble, scoop, and score for 6, they're probably looking down a 24-10 deficit in that second quarter. So that's 2 games in a row there if you're West Virginia that teams have gotten out to fast starts against you. And even though you scored first against Baylor, it doesn't matter if you can't continue to score. And so the margin of error for West Virginia this year has been so slim, especially with the way their defense is playing, that their offense has to almost be perfect.
Yeah.
And at some point that's going to bite you in the butt. And I don't know if it's this week because I just don't you don't know what's going to show up and you don't know who's going to show up. And I think that's been the biggest problem with this defense is that inconsistency of, is the defensive line going to show up like they did against Pitt? And are you going to have the JT Daniels that showed up in the first quarter against, who was it? Against Virginia Tech? Or are you going to have the JT Daniels that last week and in weeks prior has gone down and just put the ball wherever he's wanted it? So that margin of error is so thin, and with these good teams that you have in the Big 12, it's hard to win anyway. And when you're trying to draw possessions and steal possessions and kind of you're just reaching in some places, it gets that much harder in my opinion.
Yeah, you're right. And there's so much pressure, like you said, on this offense. JT Daniels did struggle a little bit in the first half against Virginia Tech, but he's probably the guy that I trust the most to be consistent. I mean, he's been there, he's done that at multiple schools, and he's fell down, before, and he's come back, and he's proven he can do that and stay poised and calm. But against Texas, when your back's on the wall really early, probably earlier than what you thought, you look at plays where third down, JT Daniels kind of rolls out. He could scramble for a first down, but throws it to O'Laughlin. O'Laughlin drops it, and then there's more drops, and then more drops. And so there is such a small margin for error because the defense has given up so many points. And yes, they made some plays against Baylor, but that Jazeer Cox play, I don't think that play happens in Lubbock. I really don't. So, with the defense
There,
getting,
there's a difference for me between the defense making a play happen and a play happening that the
yeah,
defense then makes. And I think multiple times this team and this defense have gotten plays made in a sense because the other team kind of did it for them through their mistakes. So you can't rely on a team making mistakes in order for you to succeed. At some point, you're going to have to go and succeed yourself. And I think this defense can do it, especially when you have a team that wants to throw the ball that much, because then they are going to mess up. I don't care who you are. I don't care if you're Tom Brady. You can't throw the ball 62 times and expect to succeed on every single one of those passes. At some point, there is going to be a chance, and you're going to have to then go make that play. You can't expect all these offenses to give you dropped balls by the quarterback, to have the wide receiver drop a ball like they did against Pitt. Like, at some point, you're going to have to go out and make a play and not have the offense make it for you.
yeah, and it's hard for me. Maybe I'm being a little glass half empty. I'm not trying to be, but I just haven't seen much of that this year. Like you said, Pitt, their turnover, they really just put the ball on the ground. Baylor put the ball on the ground. The only one you can really bring up to me is that Jacoby Spells. He kind of jumped the route, but I personally think Grant Wells is not a good quarterback. So against a team like Texas Tech, they are going to have to make a play, and it's just you're right that there's going to be mistakes, especially when you air it out that much. But this defense hasn't proved to me that they can really step up and jump the route and make the play for themselves rather than capitalizing on something that the offense a mistake the offense makes. But they have that chance. We're only 6 games through the season. This is the halfway point, and you're about to play in a tough environment, kind of hostile environment against a team that really airs it out. It's going to be windy, and like you said, they've made mistakes. They've thrown 10 picks. So you got to step up and be that team that continues to force picks, because that's not going to be a good look if a team that's thrown 10 picks through 6 games is thrown all over you and they can't even turn the ball over.
Yeah, I also think to that point, though, like Jordan Leslie has confidence that at some point these young guys are going to figure it out because they do have talent. It's just a matter of them figuring it out. He said there has been some improvement, especially with in-game drive to drive, play to play, and adjustments that he just hasn't seen. Will there be as many play to play adjustments because of the tempo Texas Tech runs? No. But when you start going drive to drive, quarter to quarter, that's where I expect some adjustments to be made. And that's where I think this being game 7 rather than this being game 2 really makes a big difference for that defense.
Yeah, and where it's game 7, it's a road game. It's against a team that's had your number over the last few years. Yeah, I'm gonna need to see some adjustments, because it's gonna be a game where you're gonna give up points, but just because you give up points doesn't mean you're out there losing. And that Baylor game really proved that. That defense bent and they gave up yards. Well, like you said, they didn't break. So adjustments are going to be needed. Personnel adjustments are gonna be needed, especially with Wilson Lamp not coming into the second half. I'm sure there's going to be a guy, maybe 2 guys that when put on an island against Texas Tech, they're really going to struggle. So if they're struggling the entire game, I'm going to want to see some personnel adjustments. But obviously, when you look at the depth, it might not be there at this point. So I'm going to need to see something. But Wesley and Brown, they're very confident in the defense. So maybe they see something we don't.
For me, the most telling stat is that there are 130 FBS teams. West Virginia is in the bottom 15 in plays and yards per play allowed on defense. They are allowing 6.4 yards per play, which is
Only that.
a big number. Only that, right? Anything else before we get into picks this week?
No, I'm gonna need to do better on picks this week.
Yeah, you went 1-4. I went a cool 3-2, and I think for the first time this year, I'm beating you overall head to head.
I think you are.
4 games on the slate this week. Couple Big 12 ones. We'll start here. Kansas State at TCU. Man, TCU looks like the best team in the Big 12, and they look like they could be headed to a college football playoff berth. TCU at home, they still have a lot to play for, but so does Kansas State, but I'm going to take TCU.
Let's go Kansas State. Let's play devil's advocate. I don't know why. I said last week that I didn't believe Max Duggan would take them to the promised land, and they turn around and win another game. So maybe I should shut up. But I'm going to go Deuce Vaughn, Kansas State.
Texas, Oklahoma State in Stillwater. Obviously, Oklahoma State just lost to TCU in what was a pretty ugly loss, I think. If this game was in Austin, I would pick Texas. I think Oklahoma State, though, they've got to have this. Texas, I do think, is a top 3 team in this league, but I do think Oklahoma State wins this week.
Yeah, I kind of tend to agree with you on that. I mean, I really want to pick Texas just because of what I've watched here lately. Quinn Ewers, and I like the Sarkisian offense right about now. But it's hard for me to pick against Mike Gundy and the Cowboys, especially in Stillwater, where the fans are going to be beating on the mats the whole time. I'm going to go Oklahoma State.
Let's now turn our last non-West Virginia pick. Little Pac-12 action for you. Oregon, UCLA. It's in Autzen, in Eugene. They're up in the Northwest. Truth be told, I'm an Oregon guy. So family there. I'm gonna pick the Ducks. They're at home. They're gonna get it done.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie to you. I haven't watched much Pac-12 football this year. I'm not the biggest Bo Nix guy, but I'm not a huge believer in UCLA. So I'll go Oregon. It's in Autzen. I'll go just for that reason.
And then finally, our game here. I'll go first here. I'll give a little pick and then a little reason why. Ultimately, I think this game will come down to how long West Virginia holds the ball away from Texas Tech, and then how efficient is West Virginia on offense. Is it going to be the West Virginia we saw on offense on the road against Texas, or is it going to be the West Virginia we've seen against Kansas, against Baylor, where they've kind of had their way at times in that game? I think West Virginia puts up points, but I just don't know where your stops are going to come from because, like, this defense, this secondary is in rough shape, and until they prove otherwise, I just have to go with what I've seen, and that is not great football. So I'm going to take Texas Tech. They win in a close one, and I just don't – I mean, Neil Brown's due, and everything points to West Virginia winning this game and having the opportunity and the chance to win this game, but I just don't believe in the secondary enough yet to get enough stops. And so I'm going to take Texas Tech. Texas Tech 45, West Virginia 41.
Yeah, I hate to sound so harsh on the secondary, but like I'm with you. I don't believe in them as far as getting that stop, getting that set of stops. I think it's going to be a close game. I think a big point, like I said, is going to be how fast the Mountaineers start. I think they will keep pace with the Red Raiders, but I think it's going to be a shootout. It's going to be a type of game that might come down to 1 or 2 plays, like I've been talking about, maybe against Pitt, whereas a drop pick or a drop pass for a pick. I'm not saying it's going to be that, but I'm going to say it's going to be something where I think somebody's defense is going to have to make a play. And I think it'll be Texas Tech. Maybe they'll get pressure on JT and maybe a scoop and score, something like that. I can just see something like that happening late in the game. I'm going to go Texas Tech 45, West Virginia 35.
Well, there you have it. We'll see. We'll see what happens, right? For those who are unaware, game time is set for 3 p.m. I know it was going back and forth, I believe, on the time due to Major League Baseball there. Actually, no, it was going back and forth on channel. So 3 p.m., Fox Sports 1, Texas Tech 6.5-point favorites. We'll see. We'll see what happens. Keep it locked to BlueGoldSports.com for all your up-to-the-minute game day information with regards to this game and other West Virginia sports. Real quick, shout out to Joe Mazzulla, first NBA win last night on opening night for the Boston Celtics. Big time guy doing big time things up there in Boston. We'll get to you with a basketball preview in the upcoming weeks. I think they open their season on November 7th, I think it is, at home against Mount St. Mary's. So we'll get you that. We'll get that covered when it is time. Until then, we will probably see you back here this weekend with a reaction podcast from West Virginia's game. Until then, have a great week. If you made it this far, we do appreciate you listening. And this is the Blue Gold Sports Podcast.